Welcome to Musical Minds and Missions, M Cubed. I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. M Cubed is brought to you by Phenotypic Recordings, a media company that brings to light new music by world-class musicians and innovative composers, with a focus on music that highlights the most important issues facing the world in our time. In this episode, we're joined by Melanie Ambler. She's a medical student at Stanford and an accomplished cellist who has found a remarkable way to combine her passions for music and medicine. Melanie shares her journey of creating Musical Rounds, a project that brings personalized musical experiences to terminally ill patients, offering comfort and connection through the power of music. Join us as we explore the profound impact of music in healthcare and Melanie's vision for the future of music medicine. Melanie Ambler, it's great to be talking with you today. You've been doing a lot of important and valuable work and research at the intersection of medicine and music. You're in medical school at Stanford, and I want to begin by asking you what first drew you into this field of study and how it all began.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm really excited to share about this work and about my journey to getting to where I am today. I think my interest in music and medicine has always existed. I kind of had these parallel paths of starting to learn the cello when I was 8 years old and continuing all the way up until now and forever, I think, as well as having this kind of innate interest in science and how things worked and human emotion as well. And so as I was growing up, I was kind of exploring, okay, what does the field of neuroscience look like? What does medicine look like? And also concurrently going to symphony orchestra rehearsals and chamber music practice and my private lessons, and realized not until I got to undergrad that these were two things that actually didn't have to exist separately in my life, and that they could be combined in a really meaningful and powerful way for patients, for their loved ones, for staff members alike, and that there's a really beautiful niche of a field called music medicine, which kind of encompasses any musical experience that someone in a hospital setting or in a healthcare setting could be offered. And that's really been my area of focus for the better part of, I guess, almost the last decade now. And I just absolutely love everything to do with this intersection and seeing the power that something that is so powerful for me personally to play can actually emanate to others as well.
It's really wonderful because I think a lot of young cellists get set on a path and think, okay, I'm going to be a concert cellist and in concert halls, and doctors the same way, sort of have a very narrow focus on their career. But it's so unusual to have the two things combine in this way and to find this field of research and work that you've found. It's really extraordinary. And you've been doing this for 10 years and you're only 28. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I feel lucky to have found something so early on that I feel so excited about. And you're right that the paths actually are quite similar in terms of their rigor and the ladder of hierarchy that you can climb and continue to climb without really looking beyond, and what are some other options or ways in which to incorporate those things into your life. So I've learned maybe to take a slightly more circuitous route than normal.
Yeah. And I mean, the intersection of music and healing has certainly been around for a long time. And we think of the 12th century Hildegard von Bingen and, even probably before that. But you found a way to bring this together, these two fields together in such an unusual way. And
Thank you.
Right now you have a project called Musical Rounds. You work with terminally ill patients and you sort of tailor make a musical performance based on that person, that individual. and you create this kind of amazing document that is their life and your response to their life. And tell us about musical rounds.
Yeah, thank you so much for that description. That's one of the best I've heard, even better than what I can describe, maybe. But musical rounds really was born out of some experiences that I've had in the past few years playing at the bedside, both virtually and in person, of patients experiencing critical illness. And those kind of sacred moments that you can witness as someone pretty separate from that personal experience of the patient or the loved one, but provide such a moment for reflection and for shared experience at a time where there's really high levels of stress, of pain, of anxiety, of something called anticipatory grief, when patients and families likely know that time is limited. And so you can actually start going through the phases of grief before it's even happened. And I found that I was really drawn to those moments. So while at Stanford, I'm very close to being done. I'll be done in a few months now. I took a year off and received a research grant to start kind of a research study / passion project that I called Musical Rounds, which is kind of a play on rounds, both that we do in the hospital as well as that you can do musically. And my goal was to reach as many people during this year as possible and provide a recording session at the bedside in the hospital. Didn't require patient or family to move or to change position really at all, and allowed for that moment to be archived and shared with other people if they so want. And what that looked like essentially was a recording session between myself, my cello Shelby, who we'll meet in a little bit, and the patient and or the family or loved one that was present. Sometimes I did recordings with patients alone. Other times I did recordings with patients and loved ones together in a moment of kind of shared reflection and conversation. And sometimes I did the recording just with the loved one if the patient was unable to respond for a variety of reasons, but most often if they were kind of in intensive care and unresponsive. And what that interview looked like was not really an interview, but a conversation, kind of like what we're having right now, where I asked very simple questions about aspects of their lives that brought them meaning, joy, love. And as they would respond to those questions, I would musically be thinking, okay, how would I represent this story that they're telling me in the form of a soundtrack? And after they spoke, then I would play an improvisation inspired by that story and kind of show the most active form of listening that I have, which is to be able to distill something that was verbally told and see what happens when I pick up my instrument. Obviously, some recordings were personally felt more successful than others, but they were very well received and I think valued so deeply by the patients and the families and loved ones that I was able to meet with during that year. Because it was a research project, we did look at some outcomes of like pain, stress, anxiety, and comfort levels, which I asked patients and loved ones to self-report before and after the session. So it was pretty minimal on like the research burden per se, but it still gave me information of, okay, where were they starting and where were they ending? And we found very meaningful, significant decreases in patient pain, stress, anxiety, and comfort, and very meaningful improvements in loved ones in stress, anxiety, and comfort. So not a difference in pain, but otherwise quite powerful in that way.
It's interesting because on your LinkedIn profile, you mentioned integrating music as a non-pharmacological, cost-effective complement to medical care. And I thought that was really interesting perspective to put it in terms of not having to take, expensive drugs which have side effects, but to have this to have pain relief through music and
Yeah.
and stress relief through music. And also, I mean, what a gift to the families after the loved one passes as well. What is it like emotionally for you?
It's a variety of emotions, I would say. I think the way that I like to describe it that I've found is kind of most accurate is that I like to picture kind of a curve of human emotion, where the most common emotions are kind of in this like big bell curve body, and then there are the more extremes on either side of the tails, with like the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And I think this year I met with 100 patients and 87 loved ones and heard so many stories, saw so many different human experiences. And I feel like those tales have just extended for me, in terms of kind of having perspective on what people are going through on one hand, and also what brings people such fulfillment and joy and kind of life goal achieving qualities that different people share at different moments and different ages in their lives. I think it also brought out, it's a very different experience being a musician in the room rather than like a medical student or a part of the medical care team. I think naturally, Sarah, you're a musician as well. When you're playing your piano and you're sharing your music with someone, I can imagine that you feel that your heart is kind of like cracked open for them. If you want this performance to be as beautiful and impactful as possible, there's got to be this emotional connection with whatever you're playing. And I think that was obviously the same for me, but maybe even more so because this was a one-on-one experience where I was creating something personalized for that one individual. I wasn't looking out into an audience of 1,000 people, which is a much different feeling. Still vulnerable in a different way. And comparing that to the feeling of going into a room as a care provider and a part of the medical care team where you actually can put up that boundary a little bit more, and that your goal for the session with whoever you are speaking with is more so to push care forward and to aid in whatever is going on. So it's a very different feeling for me emotionally, and something that I actually really enjoyed, but I found was close to getting to be too intense at times. And overwhelming. So I had to kind of like set boundaries for myself on how much I was able to do in a day or a week or a month, and listen to that really closely.
We're going to listen to an example of what you've been doing of the musical rounds. Maybe you can introduce this man and who he was, and it's about he was talking about hummingbirds.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite excerpts of a recording that I took this past year. I met this wonderful man and his wife on a winter afternoon with one of the social workers on the team at Stanford Hospital. And she had told me that he was one of her favorite patients, and she actually kept him on their list for longer because she wanted to just have more time with him to chat. And he was nearing the end of his life, and was very accepting of that, very at peace with that, very communicative and reflective towards his wife, his daughters, and the rest of the medical team as well. And so when I met with him, he was very excited to be interviewed and hear the music. And his goal for himself was to be able to leave the hospital and get back to his home, to his garden, where his favorite thing in the world was watching the hummingbirds. And so this clip is him describing that moment, as well as his desire to share that moment with his family. And it's just one of my favorite descriptions of nature. Now, every time I see a hummingbird, I think of him and his wife.
And then this is you responding to what he's talking about. So that's in real time, and he's talking, or it's later on. You start playing and you start responding to his story.
Yeah, so the way that that recording worked is the way that all recordings that I did worked during the year, where in the room, the conversation was kind of a ping pong back and forth. So I would ask a question, the participant would respond, and then I would respond with my instrument, and then we would rinse and repeat. And so the music never went over or under the person speaking as the session was going on. But then when I went home, I would mix the recording post-production and essentially treat the music as an accompanying soundtrack to whatever was shared. So this recording that you'll hear is the edited version of that, where I kind of spliced and adjusted the patient's voice to accompany, to fit the accompaniment of the underlying cello hummingbird. So that's what you'll hear. And I think it's quite a cool mix of textures and voice with music. Yeah.
Let's listen to it.
It's really wonderful.
The hummingbirds are my favorite. And actually, I can't wait till my sister comes, because I don't think she's ever seen a hummingbird live. So it'll be nice to sit down with her in the garden and wait till they come down. And yes, I do get a lot of peace out of just sitting outside, a little bit of sunshine, looking at nature, breathing clean air, best medicine in the world. Yeah, I try spotting them in the tree, because they'll go up there, and I've got good enough where I can make them out. But you're right, they can sometimes sit for quite a while. I've lived the life of a hummingbird, flitting here and there through life.
Can I play you a hummingbird song?
Sure, I'd love it.
There you go. I've never tried to portray a hummingbird.
I would love it.
Okay.
Very nice. Catches a hummingbird. Exactly. You've got the flutter in there, then you've got the coming in, zooming out, and then you got the tranquil sections where I imagine them sitting on the feeder and drinking nectar. So, yeah, invoked it all, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome.
You described what I was picturing, and that I came through musically too.
I can see it vividly in my mind. Most amazing bird, I think, in all the world, and there's hundreds of species of them. But the different varieties and the way they've adapted to getting nectar out of flowers, long beats, shorter, fat beaks. It's I find them an amazing bird, that's all. And for the size, they only weigh a few grams. It's absolutely amazing what goes on in such a small mass, you know. We all think of geese, eagles, even pigeons, but it doesn't come close to the amazing properties of a hummingbird. Tiniest bird of all, and yet, in some ways, the most powerful. It can go faster than almost any other bird. And that astounds me. Yeah, it really does.
That's Hummingbirds with my special guest, Melanie Ambler. And that's so beautiful. This is one of the patients that you work with in the hospital. Was he able to hear it before his death?
It's a great question. I'm not sure that he was. The reason that I say that is because his wife emailed me after I had sent the recordings to him and her, and she said, "Melanie, I can't thank you enough. I didn't listen to these recordings until after he had passed away. And he passed 2 days after our recording, so it was quite a fast decline for him." And she said, "I just can't believe that I have this." She said, "My sweet love's joy and laughter. I've listened to this every night since he's died, and it's brought me such peace and such peace to my girls as well." And so that was, such a meaningful thing for me to hear, that this recording and this legacy lives on. I also had the chance to share this recording at a panel presentation with Renee Fleming and Andrew Huberman at Stanford a few months ago in an event called Music and Mind. And I asked his wife for permission to use this excerpt. And when I did, I said, "It's at Stanford. I know you don't live super close to Stanford, but if you would like to come, I would love for you to be in the audience." And she said, "I will absolutely be there." And so she drove like 2 or 3 hours to come to this presentation. And it was a very small part of the presentation, but I could just tell that hearing that recording and seeing the responses from this audience of close to 1,000 people, all hearing this and connecting with it and finding some meaning in it one way or the other was, I hope, quite healing for her and powerful, that peace that he had in his final moments was being shared with so many other people. So that was a real gift for me to have her there and to just see the project in a different light as others listen to it for the first time, instead of being kind of in the room experiencing it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a video of it on your website.
Yeah.
Where the audience just bursts into applause when you introduce his wife. And they all applaud her. It's very, very moving. Yeah.
Thank you.
And now you're doing a program where you teach others to do this work. Is that right? The training program?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So a part of musical rounds is we have the kind of live session component, which is the in-person session with patients and families. And the second component that I feel quite strongly about is, how do we get other musicians prepared, excited, trained to do this kind of work as well? I think I'm in a unique position where I kind of speak both languages of medicine and music and exist at that intersection. But I think I know there are a lot of musicians out there that really want to have social impact in healthcare, but don't necessarily know where to start. And so I developed kind of a brief springboard training into the field of music medicine, what it looks like in terms of the state of the research and how we can best personalize our music for other people and have it be as impactful as possible, as well as the specific kind of nitty-gritty aspects of the healthcare system and the legal aspects of privacy and confidentiality and all of those sorts of details that we might not think about when we're not coming in from a medical perspective. I think it also provides a really helpful distinction between the field of music medicine, which is what I practice, what a lot of different nonprofits practice, and music therapy. The way that I like to think about it is that music medicine exists on quite a broad spectrum, as kind of any musical experience that someone can have in the hospital or in a healthcare setting, from listening to the radio in a waiting room all the way up to having this personalized musical rounds experience. Where musical therapy comes in is when a music therapist who is board certified and trained in the field of music therapy goes in and essentially provides a musical intervention that has a specific therapeutic goal for a specific medical need that the patient might have. So that might be a patient just had a stroke and they lost their ability to speak. But it's been shown in research that if patients sing, sometimes their speech can be recovered faster than any other modality. And so a music therapist that might be trained in that would meet with that patient and work with them on it. And so I like to compare it as like musical rounds in music medicine could be considered kind of like physical trainers in the physical health space, or an exercise class. And music therapy is kind of akin to physical therapy, where you only go to physical therapy when you have like a specific need that you want addressed by that therapist. I think sometimes the terms are used interchangeably because yes, like what we offer in musical rounds is therapeutic in a way, but it's not like specifically targeted towards a condition or someone's condition as we're doing it. We're kind of going in and treating the person like as a whole unit and providing that experience within the health setting. So I think I went on a tangent, but I think it's like an important part of the field that often gets a little bit confused and thus limits how much of this work can actually reach people. So I figured I would chat about that.
Wow, it's very important. And I think of Maurice Ravel, who at the end of his life had a brain, I don't know if it was a brain tumor. I should have looked it up, obviously, but that he couldn't speak. And there was a pianist who came over and played one of his pieces and intentionally hit a wrong note. And Ravel got upset and, spoke at that moment and said, no, that's wrong. I mean, that he wasn't responding to anything but that one sort of just music itself. Yeah. And I have a number of friends who, during the COVID-19 pandemic, did Zoom concerts for hospitals and for people who had terminal illnesses. And I know that you did Zoom or you did virtual concerts. What was it like starting to do in-person visits with patients?
It's a great question. And my first introduction into the field of playing one-on-one for people was during the pandemic, because I wasn't medically trained to be able to help really in any way. And this was the way that I felt I could give back. And those sessions, just as this one, is also very personal, even though we're not in the same location, I think has a really powerful place in connecting people, creating community, decreasing feelings of isolation, even when you are physically isolated from others. That I think was quite powerful at a time when we didn't have the capacity to go in person. Once I started medical school and I had the opportunity to have a hospital badge where I could literally just walk in and not be questioned and bring my instrument and see what happened, was such a different but very familiar feeling. I think in some ways it's both easier and harder. It's easier in that you get to see kind of the patient's full space and their body language a little bit more clearly, other family members that are present, and can really show with your own body more that connection and that desire for a shared moment together. At the same time, it's a lot more distracting being in person, because there are interruptions with different staff, with alarms, with all sorts of things that for someone who, if it's hard to play when there's external noises, it can be actually quite difficult, and you have to kind of tune things out. So I think it felt like a familiar friend, but like someone who I hadn't caught up with in a while.
Yeah. No, that's so interesting. I wasn't thinking about, I was just thinking of you being with this person in the hospital bed, but not all the beeping sounds and the nurses coming in to do tests and the everything that, the commotion that hospitals have.
Yeah, and most patients are in shared rooms too.
Yes.
So there are neighbors, there are other conversations happening, other family members. Yeah, it could be quite busy at times.
Other patients who are like, come play the cello for me.
Yeah.
I wanted to show you, I guess the audio only people can't see this, but this is a book called Charles Ives Remembered, an Oral History by Vivian Perlis. And inside she wrote, "For Sarah, with greetings and admiration from Vivian Perlis, June 1997. And there's another book, her Aaron Copland book she signed for me too. What an elegant, kind-hearted, funny, amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Woman. And Vivian Perlis was your grandmother. So
I
want to ask you about Vivian Perlis and growing up with her as your grandmother and conversations you had about music and whatever influence she had on you as, to play the cello. Tell us about
Absolutely.
Because
wow.
Among other things, she did the oral history project at Yale University and launched this just incredible resource of, every major composer there is.
Oh, wow. That even just seeing her handwriting on the video just made me emotional. She signed that book for you just 3 months after I was born.
Wow. Oh.
So that's very sweet.
Even more precious.
Yeah, my grandmother is undoubtedly one of my major life role models. She, at a time where it wasn't very common for women to be working full-time, let alone having pretty powerful projects and aspirations, kind of just rejected all of those stereotypes and felt very strongly that she also actually wanted to archive the voices of people, and those people that she chose were the great American composers of the 20th century. She did a lot of biographical work with Charles Ives, as well as Aaron Copland was one of his best friends. And I don't think growing up I really recognized the power and significance of that until actually after she passed away, where I started reading a lot more about her work and understanding just how invaluable that resource is for so many scholars in music history, and apparently maybe yourself, Sarah, which is just such an amazing legacy for her to have to leave behind. And, I really think this project, Musical Rounds, is taking that on a different spin. I'm also going in to people's places and recording their voices for other people to listen to. And there's something really special about not only sharing and archiving the story, but of actually having the voice of the person describing it. And I think for her, especially with composers that were sharing music, to hear them hum out a line of one of their symphonies or describe the way that they write their manuscripts is just such an amazing thing to be able to have now. But I knew her as Mickey. I grew up going to her house. I lived 20 minutes away. She had this beautiful pool, and I would play in the pool, and she'd have Live from Tanglewood playing. And so I didn't know that wasn't kind of a typical thing to listen to while playing pool games, but I was hearing, Mahler and Beethoven and Ives symphonies. And
this was in Connecticut, right?
This was in Connecticut. For my entire childhood.
That is incredible that you're carrying on her work in a way of recording voices, recording people's stories. And
Yeah.
you have, for each of the patients, you have a list of questions. How did you come up with that list of questions?
I think that list is very much a skeleton of kind of ideas to start conversation, and conversation that is focused on something that does not have to do with why the patient is in the hospital. Oftentimes, I actually would go into the rooms not even knowing why they were there, what their diagnosis was, because I wanted to just have a chat and learn about their favorite place or how they met their partner or a memory that brought them joy from their childhood. And so it was really based in kind of these like 4 thematic areas that I felt were quite common in the concerts that I had given previously one-on-one for patients. And that kind of centered around the 4 themes of nature, of faith, of family, and of kind of like traditions, legacy, memories outside of that. And so that was kind of the way that I structured the sessions, but I would often just treat it as the conversation and improvisation itself, not just musically, but verbally, and see where it went. You know, oftentimes I would play something and then we'd sit in silence for quite a long time, like 1, 2, 3 minutes, which is a long time if you think about it. And after that, I would often say, where did you go? What did that bring up for you? And then that would kickstart another memory or another image of another family member or something else that the person wanted to talk about. So I didn't structure them too much where it eliminated that opportunity for kind of like a natural evolution and progression as we continued musically and personally to get to know each other.
It must make you think a lot about end of life and the old saying that like nobody says on their deathbed, I should have made more money or something. I mean, that they say I should have spent more time with my kids or,
Yeah.
I mean, do you, what I'm hearing from you is mostly happy thoughts and memories, but were there people who were just scared and sad about what was happening to them?
Absolutely. Who wouldn't be? Yeah, there were certain sessions that were filled with joy and laughter and memories. And that joy and laughter was still bittersweet because I think there was this tinge of like, am I going to see those people? Am I going to get back to that place that I love? And there were other sessions that were incredibly emotionally charged and intense. I specifically remember one with a husband and wife where it was clear that the wife had accepted that she was dying and the husband was not willing to accept that quite yet. And as I was playing, he kind of broke down for the first time and I could hear them speaking to each other, but I just kept playing because I didn't want to like interrupt that moment that they were having together. And I didn't know what was said. I kind of just left it at that and we continued the session. But after the session, when I went home and I listened to the recording, their lav mics picked up that conversation that I hadn't heard yet. And it was one of the most beautiful expressions of love that I've ever heard. And to be present and be able to have provided that space potentially for them to just kind of like go within and forget that they were in the hospital for a second was something that I'll never forget.
You're going to be a great doctor. Will you be my doctor? Everybody will want you to be their doctor because it's.
Oh,
I mean,
thank you.
to have that kind of compassion and understanding and deep empathy for people. Not every doctor has it, as you very well know. It must be incredible to see these two fields and to see people in music and see people in medicine and sort of have this deep understanding of both, but they remain so separate. Do you feel that there's better knowledge since you started doing this? Has there been an increase in sort of positive steps forward in this field of music and medicine?
Absolutely. Which is really exciting for me as someone who is likely embarking on this for my life journey. There's been some really amazing work and resources that have been produced all around the world, specifically something called the Sound Health Initiative, which was out of the National Institutes of Health to encourage researchers to understand mechanistically what is going on in the body and the brain as we're listening to music or experiencing it. That unfortunately has lost a lot of funding recently. But Renee Fleming is one of the spearhead kind of people of leading that effort. And she has really brought so much amazing attention to the field and support to the field that I admire greatly. While she's not scientifically or medically trained, she has the understanding of the impact of music on a variety of settings, and has the ability to reach so many people and thus amplify the voices of others that are doing the work. So I think that's really admirable. And then there are a lot of different amazing labs that are doing research and nonprofits that are doing that. I'm hoping to start a Musical Rounds nonprofit when I graduate from med school, so keep your eyes out for that. But I think the field is really growing, and there's a push towards something called social prescription, which is the idea that arts offerings can be essentially prescribed to people that are experiencing loneliness or are requiring something more than just like traditional medications or psychotherapy. So that's a really exciting thing that's in the pipeline, and I hope will be more commonplace in the United States. It's more common in other countries, like the UK in particular. But yeah, I'm excited to see where things go with it.
You have your cello, who has a name.
Yes. Shelby.
How did Shelby get the name Shelby?
So fellow cellists will know this, others may not, but cellos unfortunately have to have their own airplane seat. And I had never flown with my cello until I came out to Stanford. And when I did, I didn't know how to book a seat for it, so I called Delta and I asked the airline's representative, how do I book a seat for it? And she answered the phone and she said, "Hi, my name's Shelby. How can I help you today?" And she was one of the funniest people I've ever met. She was telling me about like traveling with her teddy bears, and we had like an hour-long conversation on the phone. No wonder Delta's like wait times are so long. But I was telling this story to someone else, and he mistakenly thought that I had named my cello Shelby just for the purpose of buying the seat. And then it just stuck. And she's absolutely like retained a persona of Shelby since then. So there's some Shelby Delta Airlines representative out there that has no idea that an instrument is named after her, but I think she'd like it.
Yes, absolutely. What will you play for us?
Well, I have two potential options. One is to ask you a question and improvise based on your response.
Oh.
Another is to play kind of a composition inspired by an improvisation that I did for a patient before I started musical rounds, who was the inspiration for then starting it. So whatever or both you think you would enjoy, I'm happy to try out.
That's amazing that you would ask a question and then play in response.
We can try that, see how it goes, and if you don't feel right, then we can use the other.
Okay.
Well, Sarah, the question that I kind of always started my sessions with that I thought was a really beautiful way to get to be transported to somewhere else was to ask you what your favorite place on Earth is. Not just where your favorite place is, but what time of day it is, what the weather is like, who you're with, if you're with anyone, how old you are. Feel free to take a second and bring me there as best as you can.
Being the one asking the questions. Wow. I guess I immediately think of McClure's Beach and on the Point Reyes Peninsula. It was my father's favorite place, and it was where he scattered his ashes. And it's a kind of rough beach in a way because there are big rocks, and it's an ocean beach, and there's a long, long walk down through wildflowers, and it's lovely to go there in the morning. And long, steep walk down, lots of wildflowers, and long path, and then you get to the beach, and the sound of the surf. And yeah, I would imagine a lot of people think of beaches. Now you have your eyes closed, so you're really listening. And I remember you said somewhere in an interview you did that you also feel when you're speaking to someone at the end of their life that listening is one of the great gifts you can give to that person. Listen.
All right, let's go to Point Reyes.
McClure's Beach.
McClure's Beach. Feel free to close your eyes if you'd like as well, and go there. Otherwise, you can watch me, but I'll close my eyes.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So that's what you do. You've done that 100 times with people. I mean, it's a very...
Yeah, I guess I've done that potentially more because I would do a few improvisations for each person, so...
It's a very intense experience. I mean, it's beautiful, and it's so generous. And so, I mean, I can see how you're related to Vivian Purlis.
Thank you.
But just, yeah. Did she ever hear you improvise?
She did not, no.
When
I didn't start improvising until just a few years ago. I trained classically for quite some time and then felt like I wasn't using my music in the way that I wanted to exactly. Like it felt constricting in the context of playing for people one-on-one. So I tried to turn off that little self-inhibition and just see what happened with improvising. I'm curious, you said it was a little bit intense, or I forget the word that you used, but I'm curious from my perspective, like what you mean by that. And
because we've just met, and it's a very personal, I mean, I'm on the verge of tears because I thinking about a place that's meaningful and where would I want to go. And then I think about, walking on that beach with my father when I was little. And that's something I never talk about. And then we're talking about it. And then you play and you're not doing now I'm just weeping, but you're not, what you do is so beautiful. And it's not sort of, here's some wave sounds and here's some beach noises and here's some sand and here's the sun. It's not like, I feel like you're actually responding, you're listening and you're responding. And you're not just like, here's this kind of, I'm just cutting off this piece of cloth that I made at some other time and I'm just here, snip, snip, and here's this thing. It's like you're really in the present moment. And that's incredible and sort of unexpected, even though, like, I do all this research about you and I read about you and watch your videos. Having that experience is completely different and kind of really surprising. And I mean, in a great way, but it's a real gift you've given to me today. It's real.
Aww. Thank you for sharing that. The way that I kind of phrase it to people is that like, you're very much the composer. Like you gave the inspiration and the kind of the palette for like what I can create musically. And so I think it's really special to have moments where something creatively wouldn't exist without the other person's like participation and vulnerability and willingness to share that thing that you probably haven't shared with many people to an absolute stranger. So that's a gift for me as an artist. And then I think it kind of immediately flows back as a gift for you for sharing, and allows for that kind of rapport and that connection to deepen so fast, and in kind of like a mega dose, I like to think of it, because it's really quite powerful how just a moment of music and of silence from words in a shared moment together allows for that to kind of deepen itself. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Extraordinary. What are your plans after medical school? Are you going
That's
to
the golden ticket question. I'm sure my parents would love to know the answer. I'm kidding. No, they're incredibly supportive. I think I'm still deciding for myself what next steps are. I feel obviously so strongly about this work and would love for musical rounds to grow and include other musicians, other places, more patients and their loved ones. In order for that to happen, I can't also be in residency training. So I'm considering taking a bit of time before going to residency and continuing my medical journey to really see where this work can lead. As we said, the path is often circuitous, so we'll see what happens.
Thank you so much. And I have lots more questions, but maybe that's a good place to stop. Thank you so much.
For his second episode.
Exactly.
Thank you for listening to M Cubed from Phenotypic Recordings, co-founded by Michael Hostetler and Stephen Pretzman. Today's program was produced by AJ Machado, and I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. Please follow or subscribe so you know whenever we post a new show. You can reach us at info@phenotypicrecordings.com, and we're always glad to hear from you.